So the main objective of today's video is to provide you with some reference when it comes to good versus great answers, and these three examples are for pretty senior roles, so hopefully you'll find them interesting. While working as a senior software development engineer for a web conferencing startup, my task was to decide what would be the best video streaming component to use for our platform. And after considering around 4 such components, I decided that Trillion would be the best of them for the following 3 reasons. First is that Trillion is a well-respected company, so we could definitely rely on their brand. The second was that I had built demos for each of those 4 solutions, and Trillion was the one that we could integrate with quicker, and we would rely that it was the most flexible of them. And finally, the third is that my managers had also previously used this component for other projects, so they were also convinced this was the best way to go. So we eventually implemented this component successfully in our web conferencing solution. While working as a senior software development engineer in a team of 5 for a web conferencing startup, I had to take a decision what would be the best video streaming component we should integrate in our platform. And this was no easy task to do because the whole platform was depending on this. But however, I had previous experience with this thing, so I had my main 3 components which I had to consider. And for extra caution, I also took the 4th one, a newly released one, just to see how things have evolved, just to see how technology has evolved in general. And the first criteria I wanted to compare these on was reliability. And here it was clear that component number 3, Trillion, was the most respected company of them all, and it was by far the most reliable of all. Now the second criteria here was the quality of the video itself, and here component number 4, the newest one, was offering the best level of quality. However, all the other 3 were still offering a sufficient amount of quality for our needs. The third criteria we considered here was flexibility, and here component number 1 stood out from all others because they offered the most features from all the other components. However, flexibility was not necessarily a game changer for us in this case because we were just offering streaming after all. The third criteria we had to consider here was ease of use, and here again component number 3 stood out from all the rest because with only a few lines of code we managed to successfully demo this internally. And finally, number 4 was, I had to consult with my management team, which also some of them are quite technical people, and they previously used component number 3, Trillion, so it's become obvious to me that this was the way to go. And it was actually quite a quick and successful implementation because we had allocated around 4 months for this project, and we managed to complete it within 3 months successfully. So the main reason why someone would ask you, tell me about the time when you had a problem with multiple solutions, is that they want to see how you compare the two or more solutions here. And notice in the first example there was no comparison. I only emphasized how that component was so much better than the others. When in the second one I took a step-by-step approach to compare these 4 options, and to have a conclusion here. Also notice the use of quantifiers, much better use of quantifiers in the second example. So this project happened 2 years ago while working as a director of product management for an enterprise HR software business with around 5,000 clients, averaging 1,500 employees each. And the company strategy had been to develop through acquisitions. And while this strategy proved to be very successful, technically speaking, the application was becoming quite slow and very expensive to maintain. So I spotted an opportunity here to improve the customer experience, and I asked 5 of my best architects to help me migrate the architecture from a monolithic to a service-based architecture. And for this, we also had around 3 development teams that would help us demo and perform various tests to prove that our approach was feasible in this new context. So, long story short, I then went on to successfully pitch this project to my management, and it's been an ongoing project for the past 2 years or so, and one of the main highlights in my career. Two years ago, while working as a director of product management for one of the largest enterprise HR software businesses in the world, I was handling around 5,000 customers, averaging 1,500 employees each. And the company's strategy had been to develop expand its business through acquisitions. So while this was a very successful strategy overall, it also had some drawbacks when it comes to the mix of technologies used. We had many bugs going on there, and also we found it harder to attract talented people that would be willing to familiarize with that rather old technology. So I spotted an opportunity here to further improve our customer experience, and for this I went ahead with 5 of my best architects to start architecting, the best possible approach here. And we also had around 3 development teams at our disposal to help us to test the feasibility of our architectures. And we've been doing this for around 4 months, and this technical part was only half of the project. The other half of the project I would spend in discussing with my senior management to make sure that I would understand that the business priorities would be very much in line with the software priorities. In other words, everything we do should also support their business, and for this we had upwards of 20 meetings into which I ensured that I listened to their concerns, and basically we had to find the right balance between allocating resources in addressing the existing issues and existing client requests with our monolithic approach with our existing software, and allocating newer resources for the newer project, which, by the way, it was easier for us to attract new resources because the technology was newer and people were willing to work for us because of this reason. So long story short, it's been 2 years and now it's 80% complete, and I believe this is one of the main highlights in my career. So in case it's not clear what's the difference between the 2 examples, the first example only emphasizes on the technical aspect. There's no negotiation going on there, well, except maybe with the technical team. Whereas the second example emphasizes that the technical part was only half of the project, while the convincing management and ensuring you would listen to whatever they had to say, ensure that this would be a more collaborative process on both of these dimensions. So I think I've had a pretty successful career in the banking industry, working in various roles as both the program and as project manager. However, for the past year or so, I decided to invest my time into a startup that basically provided an app for children between 3 and 5 visiting a foreign city, with the main objective of providing them with the best possible bedtime story. So I put together a team of around 10 people, content writers, developers, testers, and marketers, and we ended up delivering a working app within 6 months, and then further marketed with a budget around 100K. So, however, this application is nowhere near on a profitability path, because we ended up some are investing around $20 for each acquired user. That would only get us around $3. So nevertheless, I found this as a very interesting experience of setting up a team working for me, most of them remotely, as well as experimenting with various monetization models. So 4 years ago, while working as a program manager for a major US bank, I was assigned the project of redesigning email distribution lists for the bank. Now, why this project was required? Well, because we had 250,000 such email distribution lists, and Outlook was no longer good enough as a solution to manage them. And the project timeline was around 6 months, and I was assigned to this project midway to completion. So I basically had to ensure that everyone was doing their job and also to familiarize myself with the project. And we eventually managed to release this software within the originally estimated deadline. However, 2 days after, we realized some of those lists were crashing and emails were actually getting sent to the wrong people. So it was a very embarrassing failure on my end, and this taught me a lesson of ownership within a project, which I eventually applied for the second time when we launched it, where I ensured that I would test all the functionality present there. And also I decided to keep my team, the same team that I used in the first project, because I thought that the communication was great, and now we had a much better shot at delivering this project, which we eventually successfully delivered for the second time. So the main reason why these two examples are so different is because the first example emphasizes on a project that's not necessarily relevant to the job that you're applying for. So remember, here we're talking about a very senior role of a level 7 consultant in AWS. So I would definitely take a story from my work experience or my corporate experience as my first failure story when compared to one from my startup. This is not to say that the startup example is bad, but the startup example should be maybe a second or third option in the case of a failure story. So this is a scenario that I would very much encourage you to consider, especially for senior roles. So I hope you found this information useful, and remember, if you want to support this channel, please feel free to share your interview outcomes in the comment sections of the videos. Thank you.